Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, if I may request you to find your seats, please. We will be beginning momentarily. If I may request you to find your seats, please. We will be starting very shortly. Thank you. Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. If I may welcome you to take your seats, please, we would like to start momentarily. Thank you. Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. The Assembly will commence in 3 minutes. If I may welcome you to take your seats. May I request you to take your seats? We should be beginning in a few minutes. Thank you.
You have to start.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you to take your seats? Ladies and gentlemen, I know it's very exciting to see all your friends and you have a lot of interesting things to say to each other, but we have to start the session. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I call to order the second session of the United Nations Environment Assembly of the United Nations Environment Programme. Let me invite all the representatives to stand and observe 1 minute of the meditation and seize the opportunity to think about and thank the Mother Earth, and also observe 1 minute of silent prayer to those who lost their lives protecting the environment. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure now to invite you all to watch Welcome to UNEA film presentation.
Welcome to the United Nations Environment Assembly, the world's Parliament for the Environment. To you, the leaders of the world and of our community, this is the time for action. We face tremendous challenges. Pollution shrouds our cities in black smog, toxic chemicals leach into the earth around us, and billions of pieces of plastic litter our oceans. We are also losing our diversity. The assault on plant and animal life has pushed many of the planet's most iconic species to the brink of extinction. And we are in the midst of the largest exodus in history. Tragically, 60 million people have been forced from their homes, many fleeing war and natural disasters. The environment often lies at the very heart of these crises. All these threats will intensify as climate change speeds up. The year 2015 gave us Agenda 2030 and the Paris Agreement, unprecedented opportunities for acting now. Never before has there been such a crucial moment for us to act together. To heal ourselves, we must also heal our planet. We can keep our oceans clean. We can stop chemicals like mercury and lead from poisoning our bodies and harming the environment. We must act now to end poaching and the illegal trade in wildlife. We can chart a new path that places the environment at the center of our response to the biggest issues of our time. And to all of you I say, we know what we need to do. The time to act is now. Welcome to the second United Nations Environment Assembly.
Thank you. It's a pleasure now for me to invite Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, Mr. Achim Steiner, to make his welcome address. You have the floor.
Madam President, Cabinet Secretary, Director General, Ministers, Excellencies, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, representatives of our major groups and stakeholders, friends all over the world who today will look to Nairobi, to this, the United Nations Environment Assembly number 2, as both an expression of hope, but also a clarion call to the world that the task before you as delegates, as delegations, as nation states, but also as major groups, has never been more challenging, more urgent, but I would say also more exciting. We gather here in Nairobi for the second United Nations Environment Assembly at a time when many things are happening, but also when we look back on a year 2015, when enormous breakthroughs were achieved. More will be said about environmental health and human health. Before you arrived, many of you may be aware that already here in Nairobi, we hosted the Science Policy Forum. Last Thursday and Friday, 300 of the world's leading scientists joined us to prepare an agenda for you as governments to look at what the latest science is telling us and how policy can respond to it. We have also seen the major groups and stakeholders convening for the last 2 days with over 250 delegates, and many of your delegations also joined them for a very constructive dialogue. We also have many events that are happening alongside this week's UNEA that are not necessarily confining the work of UNEA to the conference rooms and the committees. But for instance, this morning we opened the Sustainable Innovation Expo, the tent that is on your right as you step out of here, bringing the world of technology and science and opportunity to your attention, as much as we will also have a Sustainable Innovation Symposium accompanying UNEA this week in order to bring policymakers, scientists, technology entrepreneurs, leaders from civil society together to forge new alliances, take ideas and opportunities to the next level. We will also be launching a new global campaign this week to end the illegal trade in wildlife, in which UNEP, together with UNDP, UNODC, and the CITES Convention have been tasked by the Secretary General and the UN's Policy Committee to help the world rise up to the challenge of a decision that it took last year in the General Assembly, and that built on your work 2 years ago in addressing the illegal trade in wildlife. And we will also be looking at issues that are part of the ongoing business of UNEA and your countries, such as the review of the Montevideo Programme on environmental law. We take laws for granted today, but in fact the environmental rule of law, the evolution of governance and the instruments needs continuous attention, and therefore it is something that will also feature in the policy dialogues this week. As delegates, I do feel a little sorry for you because, Madam President, you will have to work very hard while others who are on the compound will be able to engage in symposia, in side events, green room events, networking events. Hopefully, sometimes you will be able to escape from the negotiations and join those events. It is a conversation, it is a global conversation that is happening this week here in Nairobi at our headquarters at a time when the idea of a Universal Membership Assembly has truly come alive. With well over 2,000 participants, over 170 nations represented, hundreds of stakeholders and major group delegates here from the business, civil society community, faith communities, youth, students, labor, agriculture and farmers, we truly have a United Nations Environment Assembly established and ready to move. I would like to also express my appreciation to the Director General of the United Nations Office at Nairobi. As you know, preparing this campus and preparing ourselves for your arrival takes months of planning, days and nights of work, and I want to also thank our colleagues in UNON for the tremendous work that they have done. The campus is ready, UNEP is ready, the world is ready for you, United Nations Environment Assembly 2. Welcome, Karibu Sana.
Thank you very much, Executive Director. I'm very happy to invite all of you now to watch a video message from His Excellency, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, United Nations Secretary General. Actually, it will not be a video message, but Deputy Executive Director Ibrahim Tiao will read the message. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to deliver the following message from the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, addressed to the United Nations Environmental Assembly. I quote, "2 years ago, I was honored to participate in the inaugural United Nations Environmental Assembly, the world's highest level decision-making body on the environment, comprising all 193 United Nations member states and involving major stakeholders from business and civil society. The establishment of UNEA by the 2012 Rio +20 UN Conference on Sustainable Development marked a coming of age for both UNEP and global environmental governance. It was testimony to the growing recognition that without careful management of the environment, we will not succeed in our efforts to reduce poverty, improve global health, and secure enduring peace and stability. Last year, world leaders adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And last month, UN headquarters in New York witnessed the historic signing of the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. UNEA 2 is an important early way station on the journey we must undertake to implement these landmark investments in a sustainable future for all. All the topics on the UNEA 2 agenda are critical to global sustainable development, including the environmental rule of law, the illegal trade in wildlife, the protection of ecosystems, the management of natural capital, the pollution of the oceans, and sustainable urban development. In caring for and repairing the environment, it will be necessary to take on many vested interests and reject entrenched attitudes. I urge all delegates at UNEA 2 to approach their responsibilities with courage and wisdom, with the knowledge that their decision will have profound consequences for how the international community understands and delivers on the environmental dimension of sustainable development. UNEA 2 is about action, collaboration, and partnerships amongst all sectors of society. It brings together the many partners we need to realize the 2030 Agenda: government officials, civil society representatives, and members of the private sector. The number and diversity of those taking part in this year's assembly already marks an important step forward towards Sustainable Development Goal 17, which is to revitalize the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development. I would like to extend a special welcome to those taking part in the Sustainable Innovation Expo, which is bringing together CEOs, institutional investors, foundations, banks, insurance companies, and civil society representatives in a coalition for the SDGs. Business and investments are critical to achieving the 2030 Agenda. Innovation from the private sector will be key to addressing the many interlinked challenges of global development. This is not simply about what the private sector can do for sustainable development. It is about what sustainable development can do for the private sector. Trillions of dollars in public and private funds are going to be invested in reaching the SDGs, creating huge opportunities for responsible companies that are ready to deliver solutions. That is the route to ending poverty, increasing opportunity, and laying the foundation for sustainable global economic growth. The UNEA 2 Symposium on Mobilizing Resources for Sustainable Investments will take up this theme and provide companies an opportunity to engage directly with governments to determine how best to bring their innovations to scale. A second symposium on environment and displacement will build important bridges between the environment and humanitarian communities, bringing together key actors to discuss the role of environmental degradation in the forced displacements of people and communities. In a very real sense, 2016 is even more important than 2015. This year, we begin the hard work of turning our ambitions into reality. We need all sectors and all nations to work together to combat climate change and promote sustainable development. The UN Environmental Assembly has already established itself as the premier forum for global environmental governance. Now, those taking part in UNEA 2 have both the power and the responsibility to promote a global transformation of attitude and practice. The message is clear. We cannot promote sustainable development unless and until we recognize and address its environmental dimensions. We are entering an exciting new era of opportunity. Let us commit to working together to deliver a sustainable future for people and planet. Thank you. End of quote.
Thank you very much. May I now invite Ms. Zalawok Zewde, Director General of the United Nations Office at Nairobi, to make her welcoming remarks. Thank you.
This one? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Since the United Nations is also about multilingualism, allow me to make my short statement in French, for the first time, in fact. Excellence,
Your Excellency, Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources of the Republic of Kenya, Ms. Judy Wahungu, Your Excellency, President of the United Nations Environment Assembly, Ms. Oyun Sanjasuran, Honourable Ministers and Heads of Delegations, my dear colleague, Mr. Achim Steiner, Executive Director of UNEP, Mr. Ibrahim Tiao, Excellencies, Ambassadors, United Nations colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the United Nations community in Kenya, I am very pleased to welcome you to the United Nations office in Nairobi for this second session of the United Nations Environment Assembly of UNEP. This meeting is taking place at a crucial time as we embark on the implementation of the Paris Agreement on Climate Change and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I am sure that this session will make vital contributions towards the achievement of the 2030 Agenda and its 17 goals for people, planet, and prosperity. This gathering will also provide strategic guidance for UNEP and solidify its role as the leading global environmental authority. I wish to assure this Assembly that UNON, the United Nations office in Nairobi, will continue to do its utmost to service and support UNEP as it pursues its mission to advance the global environmental agenda and promote the integration of the environmental dimension in our sustainable development efforts. As you may know, UNON was created in 1996 to provide administrative and other support services to UNEP and UN Habitat, not only at the Nairobi headquarters, but also for their offices around the world, as well as to provide common services to all the UN entities based on this UN compound. UNON is the third United Nations office away from headquarters to be created after Geneva and Vienna. We remain the only UN headquarters in Africa. and indeed in the entire global south. In addition to the global headquarters of UNEA and Habitat, UNON hosts a large and unique mix of UN entities, including a dynamic country teams, several region offices of UN agencies, funds and programs, as well as peace support operations mandated by the Security Council. And we had the honour of hosting them last week here in Nairobi. As I always say, the UN, by its strong presence in the African continent, has a key, unique opportunity to progress the objectives and values of the organisation. Because we are in the real world, closer to vulnerable populations that the UN is there to serve. When I addressed the inaugural session of UNEA two years ago, I emphasised how UNEP, as the first UN body to occupy this beautiful compound over 40 years ago, remains the heart and soul of the United Nations presence in Nairobi. That continues to be the case today, and it is in no small measure due to the leadership, passion and commitment of its Executive Director, my dear colleague Achim Steiner, who has worked tirelessly over the past 10 years to strengthen UNEP, to fulfill its critical mandate and help make Nairobi the environmental capital of the world that it is today. Bravo, Achim, for all of the work that you have accomplished. As Achim Steiner concludes his tenure as Executive Director of UNEP, I would like to take this opportunity, and I'm sure that there will be others as well, to express my sincere appreciation for all he has done, for the incredible energy that he has devoted to his tasks, including as Director General as UNON, and in strengthening relations between UNEP and UNON. Permit me also to thank the Government of Kenya, our host, for its assistance with the organisation of this UNEA and for its continued support to the United Nations presence in Kenya. I hope that you will enjoy being here on this unique UN site, which all who work here are proud of. I wish you all the best in your deliberations this week, and thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we're honored here today to have with us Cabinet Secretary for Environment, Natural Resources and Regional Development Authorities of the Republic of Kenya, Her Excellency Ms. Judy Wakungu. And it is a pleasure to welcome and ask Judy Wakungu to give her speech.
Good morning, everyone. Madam President, Director General of the United Nations Office at Nairobi, Executive Director of UNEP, Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Government of Kenya, I wish to warmly welcome you all to Nairobi and to the second session of the United Nations Environment Assembly of the United Nations Environment Programme. I am informed that we have representation from many delegates across the world, which is a true reflection of UNEA as a universal body for championing environmental matters. Let me assure you of our government's full commitment to supporting the work of the United Nations and our desire to maintain Nairobi as the global multilateral hub on matters environment. As the host country for UNEP, I wish to reiterate Kenya's commitment to our partnership with UNEP to spearhead the global environment agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, for the last 50 years, Kenya has been at the forefront, advocating for a strong multilateral system as the basis for solving complex global challenges for a better world for all. The solutions we seek come from every corner and will require concerted efforts by all UN members and of different organizations of the UN system. I note with satisfaction that this second session is taking place under the theme, Delivering on the Environmental Dimension of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is building on the UNGA session, which adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Let us review progress on implementation of the SDGs, promote the integration of the economic, social, and environmental dimension of sustainable development, and address the nexus between environmental health and human well-being in light of the 2030 Agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to participate and share your concerns, experiences, and ideas for the future. I urge all delegates at this UNEA 2 to approach their responsibilities with courage and wisdom, and with the knowledge that their decisions will have a profound consequence for how the international community delivers on the environmental dimensions of sustainable development. As you are aware, science plays a fundamental role in providing answers on how to address some of the greatest challenges of the 21st century in the context of sustainable development. Understanding how science can help inform better decision-making and strengthening of the science policy interface is therefore fundamental. Ladies and gentlemen, this technical session of the UNEA of UNEP is expected to play that critical role of providing technical expertise in order to aid in making successful policies and environmental management plans for environmental sustainability. Allow me to reiterate that healthy ecosystems are a global priority, and I call upon all actors to come up with decisive measures and actions to sustainably manage, conserve, and protect them. I underscore the need to address these issues of ecosystem-based adaptation through an integrated and flexible approach, applying the 3 dimensions of sustainable development in a balanced manner. We must bear in mind that global environmental challenges continue to grow in number and complexity, and the need to find solutions has become ever more pressing. Governments around the world are therefore looking upon UNEP to provide the necessary leadership for attainment and monitoring of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in the context of environmental sustainability. Ladies and gentlemen, I am informed that there's a lot of work ahead of us to be accomplished in the next 3 days. There are more than 20 draft resolutions to be finalized and various decisions to be concluded. I urge you to expedite this noble work with the goal of reaching amicable compromise. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I encourage you all to find time to enjoy our beautiful country by visiting our museums, our national parks, our conservancies, marketplaces, and art galleries. Thank you, and I wish you fruitful deliberations.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary, for all the support that Government of Kenya and you personally have provided for UNEA 2 preparations. Thank you. Your Excellency, Cabinet Secretary, Executive Director, Deputy Executive Director, Director General of UNON, Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second session of the United Nations Environment Assembly of the United Nations Environment Programme. UNEA 2 takes place at a critical time in our history. Our generation has a historic responsibility. The future generations, our children and grandchildren, will not measure us through the commitments and agendas and policies that we will make. We have very good commitments. We have adopted very good Agenda 2030. We have a Paris Agreement. We have Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction and Addis Ababa Action Agenda for Financing for Development. The key question now is delivery. And therefore, the theme of our session for UNEA 2 is delivering on the environmental dimension of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Our agenda addresses many pressing issues, challenges, opportunities, but also we have to come up with solutions. Through UNEA 2, we can work together to address illegal trade in wildlife, promote the sound management of chemicals and waste, and help ensure the sustainable management of our oceans and marine environments. We can equip UNEA and UNEP to play their critical roles in the implementation of 2030 Agenda and the Paris Climate Agreement. We can reduce the negative impact of armed conflict on the environment and enhance the role of education and training in promoting sustainable development. UNEA 2 can help nations and people to attain the aspirations of healthy people, healthy ecosystems, and healthy environment. Whether UNEA 2 will live up to this challenge will depend on the work that all of us and individually will do in the week ahead. Distinguished delegates, as you are aware, this is my last meeting as President of UNEA. As the first President of United Nations Environment Assembly, I look back with satisfaction at the last 2 years, which have been a truly fulfilling experience. In my capacity as President of UNEA, I had the privilege of representing UNEA and your messages at the high-level political forums in 2014 and 2015 in New York, whose themes were achieving the MDGs and adopting the post-2015 development agenda, and strengthening integration, implementation, and review the HLPF after 2015, respectively. It is very important for UNEA to feed into the HLP high-level political forums, but also other international fora, and work together as complementary mechanisms. UNEA must play, and is playing, an important role, especially with regard to the delivery of the environmental dimension of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. I also had the privilege to represent UNEA at the General Assembly of UN in 2014, where Climate Summit took place, as well as in 2015, when the historic SDGs were adopted. I also conveyed the main messages of UNEA 1 to events like the World Wildlife Day in New York, the launch of the Global Waste Management Outlook in Antwerp, and the Climate Action 2016 recently in Washington, among others. At all those occasions, there was a big interest towards UNEA, but also a big expectation that UNEA is indeed the most legitimate platform where the most pressing environmental issues are being prioritized and where the global environment agenda is being set. As part of my duties, I co-chaired the first forum of ministers and environment authorities of Asia Pacific, which took place in Bangkok 2015. And as you know, all the regions now have environment ministers forums. This gave me great insight into the important role that regional ministerial fora can play in promoting environmental protection and coming up with the priorities in their region. I feel that UNEA and UNEP can actually serve as a good model and example to other United Nations organizations, how processes can be well streamlined, how member states can own the processes, work very close with the Secretariat, set the priorities, and also participate and monitor the implementation of governing bodies' resolutions and policies. As UNEA President, I was requested to help build consensus on the outstanding elements of stakeholder engagement policy, of the UNEP. And as you know, my report on this process is before you and will be discussed later on this week. And I really hope that we can all reach consensus on this policy. I thank all the major groups and stakeholders for their very active participation in all UNEA processes. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, let me extend gratitude to the UNEA Bureau, who worked very responsibly with me and persistently represented their regions. So I thank all the members of outgoing Bureau, whom I had the privilege to serve. Also, I would like to extend my profound gratitude to the Committee of Permanent Representatives under the excellent leadership of Her Excellency Ms. Julia Pataki, who very professionally chaired the CPR. The committee has played an invaluable role in preparations for our session, and I also would like to thank all its Bureau members and member states for their really hard work for the preparations for the UNEA too. For the last 10 years, the Executive Director, Mr. Achim Steiner, has worked tirelessly as an advocate for the environment with great passion and professionalism. This is your last UNEA session at the helm of UNEP. Mr. Steiner, we all thank you for taking UNEP to the new heights. And I also would like to thank Secretariat for supporting me during the tenure as UNEA President. I wish you all the best in your new post as Director of the prestigious Oxford Martin School. I'm sure you will do as excellent job as you have always been doing. Also, you know, we will be electing the new President and the new Bureau, so I would like to wish every success, and I'm sure that there will be unwavering support as you all take the new responsibilities. Of course, when we're so focused on technical plans and international meetings like this, we forget sometimes the environment itself, the land and the soil and the water that supports our lives every day. So I encourage all of us, when we are here this week and when we go home and continue to work on these issues, to know where our water, the water in our homes and offices comes from, which stream or river or mountain exactly. Also to know where is the land that is giving us our daily bread is located. For all of us to seek out the source of our natural resources, to praise the land and to praise the water and give it our thanks. Perhaps teaching our children and ourselves not to take the clean water for granted, not to take the daily bread for granted, is in fact one of the most important steps in protecting and conserving our magnificent natural resources and conserving our Mother Earth. I thank you all of you for your support and cooperation, and I wish all of us a really great UNEA too. Thank you. Distinguished delegates, this completes the opening part of the first plenary meeting of the second session of the United Nations Environment Assembly of UNEP. May I now invite the distinguished delegates to turn to agenda item 2, and that is organization of work. First, we have to consider agenda item 2A, which is election of officers. Rule 18 of the Rules of Procedure of UNEA provides for the election of the 10-member Bureau of the United Nations Environment Assembly, consisting of a president, 8 vice presidents, and a rapporteur. In accordance with the principles of regional rotation, the president of this session of the Assembly will be elected from the Latin America and the Caribbean group. The other officers will be elected as follows: 2 vice presidents from the Africa group, 2 vice presidents from the Asia and the Pacific group, 2 vice presidents from the Eastern Europe group, 1 vice president from the Latin America and the Caribbean group, and 1 vice president from the Western Europe and other groups. And we'll have a rapporteur from the Western Europe and others group. With regards to the office of the president, the Latin America and the Caribbean group has nominated His Excellency Mr. Edgar Gutierrez Espeleta, Minister of Environment and Energy of Costa Rica. We will conduct the election of the President by acclamation. Is it the wish of the Assembly to elect His Excellency Mr. Edgar Gutierrez Espeleta as the President of the Assembly by acclamation? Thank you very much. It is so decided. It is with great pleasure that I declare the election by acclamation of His Excellency Mr. Edgar Gutierrez as the President of the second session of the United Nations Environment Assembly of the United Nations Environment Programme. I now invite the President to take his place on the podium. Mr. Gutierrez.
This is a big room. Su Excelencia,
Your Excellency, Madam Judy Wakungu, Cabinet Secretary for the Environment, Natural Resources and Development Authorities of the Republic of Kenya, Mr. Achim Steiner, Executive Director of UNEP, Honourable Ministers, Honourable Madam Oyun Sayasuren, President of the first UNEA, Executive Directors of United Nations agencies and programs and international bodies, representatives of civil society and the private sector, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I should like to start by thanking you all for the trust placed in me to chair the United Nations Environment Assembly. In particular, I would like to thank GRULAC for entrusting me with such a prestigious responsibility. It is with great pleasure and commitment that I have agreed to serve as President. I hope to contribute in the facilitation of political dialogue and decision-making to promote the change that today is required of us by the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. Allow me to thank the President of UNEA 1 for her commitment and tireless efforts to achieve consensus and enshrine this Assembly as the universal voice of the environment, as was agreed by heads of state and government at Rio+20. In particular, I would like to highlight the broad process of consultations that she spearheaded, which means that today we have an inclusive policy proposal on major groups and relevant stakeholders, which promotes the active and responsible participation of sectors of all civil society. Thank you very much, Oyun. This week we will have the opportunity to tell the world about the enormous added value that the environmental dimension has as we move towards sustainable development. This opportunity will be valued if we are able to prioritize the environmental issues that bind us together. Only in doing so we will be able to achieve effective progress more quickly and with the participation of all stakeholders. With UNEA 2, we must agree on environmental action to deal with challenges that are so key at this time, such as the elimination of extreme poverty throughout the world by 2030, as is enshrined in the Sustainable Development Goals. So this week, we will have the opportunity to deepen not only the relation between health and the environment, but also the environmental action which we have to take to make good on the commitments and agreements reached in 2015, which will mean changing our development paradigms. I'm referring to the 2030 Agenda, the Paris Climate Agreement, the Agreement on Financing for Development, and the Sendai Agreement. In each and every one of these agreements and commitments, the key role of the environmental dimension is crystal clear. That is why, in UNEA 2, we need to push ahead with the process of integrating environmental policies further into economic and social policies. UNEA must contribute to strengthening cooperation, coordination, dialogue, alignment, integration, harmonization, and the complementarity of national public policies and their environmental components. And indeed, the drafting and implementation of global programs, policies and plans to deal with common problems and foster public policies in priority areas such as sustainable development, environmental cooperation and the eradication of poverty. This will promote a vision of holistic and inclusive development which will ensure the sustainability of our country's development, the hallmarks of which should be high productivity, equity, the resilience of our societies, and living in harmony with nature. I would like to thank the Committee of Permanent Representatives, under the leadership of the Ambassador of Romania, Julia Pataki, for managing to devise the draft resolutions and decisions to be considered by this Assembly. I would also like to thank Ambassador Pataki for providing us with a text with the take-home messages of UNEA 2, which will be considered by ministers at the appropriate time. I would also like to thank the regional groups who met over the last few months to offer their contributions for this UNEA 2 meeting. I would also like to acknowledge the UNEP Secretariat for the work they have done in preparing for this meeting, as well as preparing the working documents, which undoubtedly provide us with relevant inputs for our debates. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge the sterling work carried out by Achim Steiner over the last 10 years at the helm of UNEP as Executive Director. Under his leadership, a significant contribution has been made to defining the interaction between issues pertaining to the environment, wealth generation, and fighting poverty and inequality, which is undoubtedly a necessary step to achieve sustainable development. During his leadership of this program, Mr. Steiner has contributed to achieving enhanced environmental governance throughout the world, firstly by establishing universal membership of UNEP's Governing Council, followed by the establishment of this Assembly, as well as promoting synergies between MEAs. In this domain, new action pathways have been identified to deal with emerging problems and to facilitate multilateral negotiating processes, such as Mercury. Thank you very much, Achim. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an intensive week of dialogue and consensus building ahead of us on priority global issues and some emerging issues. We need to decide on how decisively to make progress on the effective integration of the environmental dimension into other sectors and agendas, acknowledging the planet's limits, as well as recognizing that only through integrated efforts will we be able to maximize the benefits for a greater well-being for all people without undermining the capacity of the natural system to continue offering a vehicle of life for human beings. As President of this Assembly, I will do my utmost to facilitate dialogue and negotiations, and in so doing to build, together with all of you, consensus-based solutions. I am counting on you all to support me in this task. Thank you very much.
We will now proceed to elect the other officers of the Bureau of the second session of the United Nations Environment Assembly as follows. 2 vice presidents from each of the regional groups, the African Group, Asia and the Pacific Group, Eastern Europe Group, Latin America and the Caribbean Group, Western Europe and Others Group, and also we are going to, as well, elect the rapporteur from the Western Europe and other groups. I believe that we already have the names of the nominees for each of the groups, which are here Ms. Amina Mohammed, Minister of Environment of Nigeria from the Africa Group, His Excellency Mr. Emmanuel Isose Nondet, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Gabon, from the Africa Group, His Excellency Mr. Hassim Umadi, Acting Minister for Health and Environment of Iraq from the Asia and the Pacific Group His Excellency Mr. Ramon Paje, Secretary Minister of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources of Philippines from the Asia and the Pacific Group, His Excellency Vladislav Smrč, Deputy Minister of Environment of the Czech Republic from the Central and Eastern Europe Group, His Excellency Nebojsa Kaludrovoik, Permanent Representative of Montenegro to the UN Office in Geneva from the Central and Eastern Europe Group, His Excellency Denis Lowe, Minister of Environment and Drainage of Barbados from the Latin American and the Caribbean Group. Is it the wish of this Assembly to elect by acclamation the proposed officers as the 8 Vice Presidents of the Second United Nations Environment Assembly? The 8 Vice Presidents are elected. With regard to the office of the Rapporteur, it's my understanding that the Western Europe and Others Group has decided to nominate Her Excellency Ms. Roxanne de Bilderling, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Belgium to UNEP as a Rapporteur. Is this the wish of this Assembly to elect by acclamation Her Excellency Roxanne de Bilderling as Rapporteur of the United Nations Environment Assembly as its second session? So it is decided. I'm sorry, but I forgot to read another member of the Bureau. That is His Excellency Mr. John Matusak, Senior Advisor of the Office of Environment Quality and Transboundary Issues, Bureau of Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs, Department of State of United States of America, from the Western Europe and Others Group. I apologize. With regard, I now invite Her Excellency Ms. de Bilderling to take her seat on the podium as the Rapporteur of the Assembly at its second session. Where is she? She's being escorted. Okay. May I take this opportunity to congratulate the newly elected officers and wish them well, and wish to gavel the composition of the old Bureau as it was announced. Let us now turn to agenda item 2, adoption of the agenda. I invite the distinguished delegates to turn their attention to document UNEP/EA.2/1/Rev.1 containing the provisional agenda, as well as document UNEP/EA.2/1/Add.1/Rev.1 containing annotations to provisional agenda. Before I ask the delegates to make their comments on the agenda, I would like to propose that we deal with agenda item 11 on other matters before agenda item 10 on approval of the report, in order for such other matters to also be reflected in the report. Does the Assembly wish to adopt the provisional agenda as contained in UNEP/EA.2/1/Rev.1? I hear no objections. The agenda is adopted. Next, we shall consider the organization of work of the second session of the United Nations Environment Assembly under item 2C. I wish to draw your attention to document UNEP/EA.2/INF/3, which is the scenario note for the second session of the United Nations Environment Assembly. The scenario note contains the recommendations as agreed by the Bureau. I recommend that the Assembly establishes a committee of the whole as a sessional working body to consider the proposed draft resolutions. I also plan to establish one group of friends of the President, to review the draft document outcome of for the high-level segment. This is to support me in consultation in order to approve the document. It is further recommended that the plenary of the Assembly meet in the form of the high-level segment on Thursday and Friday, 26th and 27th May of 2016, following the opening of the high-level segment and up to the end of Thursday, 26th. There will be a ministerial dialogue on the overarching theme of delivering on the environment dimension of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This dialogue will be followed on Friday morning by the introduction of the Global Thematic Report on Healthy Environment, Healthy People, and a thematic session consisting of both plenary and parallel roundtable ministerial dialogues. A multi-stakeholder dialogue on the theme Restoring and Sustaining Healthy Ecosystems for People and Planet, Partnerships to Deliver on the Environmental Dimensions of the 2030 for Sustainable Development will take place on the 27th of May. It is recommended that the Committee of the Whole meets starting from this afternoon at 3 p.m. and that it considers the following items. Agenda item 4, international environmental policy and governance issues, illegal trade in wildlife, science policy interface, chemicals and waste, marine plastic debris and microplastics, air quality, ecosystem-based adaptation, global environment monitoring system water program, sustainable development and poverty eradication, emerging and other relevant issues, coordination across the United Nations system on environmental issues, relationship between the United Nations Environment Program and multilateral environmental agreements, synergies among the biodiversity-related multilateral environmental agreements, environmental law. And agenda item 5, medium-term strategy, program of work and budget, and other administrative and budgetary issues. A, revisions to the Program of Work and Budget for the biennium 2016-2017, proposed medium-term strategy for 2018-2021, proposed Program of Work and Budget for the biennium 2018-2019, management of trust funds and earmarked contributions, other administrative and budgetary issues. Agenda item 8, provisional agenda, date and venue of the third session of the United Nations Environment Assembly. The Assembly will address the remaining items of the agenda, namely item 3, credentials of representatives, item 6, stakeholder engagement, item 11, other matters, item 10, adoption of the report, and item 12, closure of the session on Friday, 27th of May, in the afternoon plenary meeting. For item 3, credentials of representatives, I will invite all delegations to submit their credentials, both soft copy and the original, to the Secretariat as soon as possible so that the Bureau can examine them and present a report to the Assembly at its plenary meeting on Friday. Are there any comments on these recommendations concerning the organization of the work of the session? May I take it that the Assembly agrees to these recommendations? I see no objections. It is so decided. The Bureau of UNEA 1, during its meeting last 5th of May, agreed to recommend that Ms. Idun Ideham, Deputy Director General for International Cooperation of the Ministry of Climate and Environment of Norway, who also served with distinction as one of the vice presidents in the Bureau of the UNEA at its first session, to serve as the chair of the Committee of the Whole. In keeping with past practices, the Committee of the Whole will be open-ended and any interested delegation may participate. I expect that a limited number of drafting groups may be established by the Committee of the Whole to assist the negotiation of resolutions and their finalization for ultimate adoption by the plenary. The open-ended Committee of Permanent Representatives, as well as the CPR, have undertaken a considerable amount of preparatory work on draft resolutions. In light of the limited time available, I urge all the delegations take this into account in their deliberations and to make every effort to reach early consensus. I will also invite all delegations to avoid including references to specific situations and to rather reflect global issues and potential action to address them. Furthermore, I announce my intention to constitute a group of friends of the President. This group will support me in the finalization of the outcome of UNEA. In regards to the group of the Friends of the President for the outcome document, I invite Her Excellency Ms. Denise Lowe, Minister of Environment and Drainage of Barbados, to support me in building consensus on this important matter. I request the group to inform the Assembly of the schedule for the consultations on the basis of the valuable draft proposal prepared by Her Excellency Ms. Julia Pataki, Chair of the Committee of the Permanent Representatives to UNEP. Please make sure that all regional groups and other groupings, as appropriate, are represented in this group of friends of the President. Are there any comments on these additional recommendations before we adopt them? I see none. The recommendation is adopted. I also recommend that the Assembly, under Rule 38 of its Rules of Procedure, agrees to establish a maximum of 5-minute time limit on all interventions by delegations and 3 minutes by intergovernmental organizations and non-governmental organizations. Shorter interventions are, of course, encouraged, as are interventions through regional and major groups. This will enable more delegations to make interventions during the meeting. Do I take it that the Assembly agrees with these recommendations? Thank you. It is with great pleasure that now I invite Mr. Him Steiner, UN Under Secretary General and UNEP Executive Director, to make a statement on his vision for the second session of the UN Environment Assembly. Mr. Steiner, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And Edgar, let me first of all begin by congratulating you on your election as you take charge of leading the Assembly through its next phase, and also to congratulate and welcome the newly elected members of the Bureau and our rapporteur. It is a great pleasure and privilege for us in the Secretariat to serve you as we have served our outgoing President and UNEA Bureau. And before I offer just a few remarks on what lies ahead of us, let me also say on behalf of the Secretariat and myself, what an honor and a pleasure it has been to serve you, Oyun, in your capacity as elected President, the first President of UNEA, and also the UN Bureau members who helped us guide both the Secretariat and you as Member States through uncharted territory. And as you pointed out, Oyun, in your statement, you were a very active President. You as the UNEA Bureau and you as President are the voice of UNEA. And I think that in itself has been for us a wonderful opportunity to be able to learn to work with this new configuration. Let me also recognize that as you begin your work today here in the Assembly, we have had a very busy 2 years, and particularly a very busy 6 months under the leadership of Ambassador Pataki, the CPR Bureau members, and also the CPR as a whole, including through the open-ended CPR that took place here in Nairobi in February and was so well attended by also capitals. You have had a fantastic group of people leading the preparatory process. If Member States themselves are not taking the lead, by default it is secretariats that begin to shape the political agenda, that begin to fill the agenda of items and draft decisions. And I can say to you, in my 10-year life here in Nairobi, there has never been a governing body meeting as actively prepared by Member States as the agenda for this United Nations Environment Assembly. And I want to thank the chair of the CPR and the whole Committee of Permanent Representatives for the excellent cooperation and collaboration that we have enjoyed. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the work is about to begin, and I don't want to stand in the way because time is precious. But, President, since you asked me to just offer a couple of thoughts, let me just say the ability of the United Nations Environment Assembly to, over time, have been seen to have made a difference depends on how it will interpret its role. It can just be a transactional place, a second-order encounter that simply views its role as, in a sense, enacting what others have decided. And to some extent, we are very explicitly acknowledging that in New York last September, in Paris last December, in Addis Ababa, in Sendai, and in years before, the mandates, the priorities and the strategic directions have been set. So, yes, one responsibility of UNEA is to focus on the implementation of this agenda. But as the scientists told us last Thursday and Friday, as the major groups also articulated again on Saturday and Sunday, and as the world will be expecting of UNEA, it is also meant to be an assembly that provides leadership. Leadership in sometimes charting the territory where others have not yet dared to walk because it is an uncertain territory. Science and that which it allows us to appreciate about what is happening across our planet, what the implications are of new technologies, of new chemicals, of new substances, new production processes, what the implications are of trying to feed 10 billion people over the next maybe 40 years who will be joining us in that human population and community, or what it means to provide them with mobility and energy, we are moving in uncharted territory. The General Assembly is where member states of the United Nations take the big directional decisions, where the political frameworks and priorities are set. But at Rio+20, heads of state and governments asked for a United Nations Environment Assembly or a Universal Membership Assembly to be established. This is a mission that is different from what it was, at least in terms of mandate, for the past 40 years before that. Your task, your challenge is to be the voice of environment, to be the authoritative forum in which science as it emerges becomes transacted into policies, and where the United Nations Environment Assembly enables nations to come together to address issues, many of them of an unprecedented nature, and that require international collaboration as never before. As you enter this hall, you will enter it with different priorities, with different views of one another's intentions, and also with deep disagreements sometimes on what is being proposed. What the world looks to you and for what we have been established as the United Nations Environment Assembly is not to deny those differences, and not even to overlook them, or to ignore them at worst, but to meet every 2 years as an assembly of the nations of this world, with major groups and stakeholders and partners and scientists present, in order to help the world overcome its differences. UNEA becomes a failure not at the moment at which it acknowledges differences and disagreements. It becomes a failure at that point at which it does not help the world to move beyond difference. And sometimes, as you will sit in the Committee of the Whole and in the drafting groups, you will have to look at commas, because sometimes a word can mean a world of difference to a community, a nation, or even an entire challenge. But I urge you to embrace that vision of the United Nations that was there from the beginning when its charter was adopted, and that has been reborn time and again, and in our case, now for the second time, is trying to live up to the expectation of unifying the world, enabling it to act even if it doesn't have all the answers, but it knows that the cost of inaction will be a terrible one to pay for our generation, for future generations who will not even have the choice to disagree with one another. They will simply have a fact of life presented to them. We live in an age and in a time where we can no longer think in generational dimensions. What you decide in the year 2016 may very well determine the quality of life of a child born in the year 2050. And what you do not decide here will make it irreversible what will happen. That is the drama. That is the drama of our time. And it is the challenge, and the challenge that we are struggling with, that the United Nations also, in all its different fora, must rise and address. So I urge you, as you enter into these groups, not to deny that we have differences, different interests and disagreements, and that commas matter, but that ultimately you negotiate with one another in good faith and with goodwill, that you concentrate first on those things that actually we do not disagree on, because it will make it easier to address those things on which we cannot yet reach consensus. I think this is really as simple and yet as powerful as one can perhaps describe the task that lies ahead of us. I would like to end my brief remarks by just expressing my appreciation also to the UNEP Secretariat team. We have, as I mentioned, worked for a long time to this day. We are ready for you. I already ask you for forgiveness when some things may not go exactly as you intend them to do, but I can guarantee you there is a Secretariat here already working day and night over the last few days, ready to serve you throughout this week. And as you begin the Committee of the Whole, also represented will be the Secretariat alongside the Committee of the Whole Chair, Ibrahim Thiaw, the Deputy Executive Director of UNEP, and his team. We are here to serve you, we are here to believe in you, and above all, we are here to be proud of what you will deliver at the end of the week to the world, to the United Nations, to the high-level political forum, to the General Assembly, but ultimately to yourselves, your families, your nations, your communities. This is why we are here. This is why we are so proud to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner, for those inspiring words to face our work ahead of us. I now invite Her Excellency Ms. Julia Pataki, Ambassador and Permanent Representative for Romania, and the Chair of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, to deliver her report on the work of the committee since the first session of the Environment Assembly in June 2014. Ambassador Pataki, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of the Committee of Permanent Representatives of UNEP to the second session of United Nations Environmental Assembly in Nairobi, our very gracious host. And allow me, Mr. President, to congratulate you for your position and the Bureau members, wishing you success in fulfilling your mandate. Today I have the honor to report to you on the CPR's activities since the first historic session of UNEA in June 2014, when the second Universal Assembly in the UN system was established as recognition of UNEP's role globally and due to the crucial importance of protecting the environment to preserve life on Earth for generations to come. The committee, as the intersessional body of this assembly, focused on the successful preparation of this second session of UNEA. Our goal has been to position the assembly as the key player in the implementation of important international commitments made by member states last year, such as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development or the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. Which subsequently further strengthens, successfully strengthens UNEA and UNEP as the leading environmental authority globally. During the last years, the committee had an intense schedule, addressed key and emerging policy issues and challenges through professional and serious debates, conducted negotiations in an inclusive and constructive manner, in the spirit and under the guiding principle of the future we want. Through debates, delegates showed flexibility in their approach in identifying common ground and to develop universal solutions to universal environmental problems. We conducted our activities based on transparency, consensus, and consultations with regional and political groups and other stakeholders. As a result, we made good progress in developing the draft documents presented for your consideration this week. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to present you briefly the highlights of the committee's work in the last 2 years. First of all, we developed a roadmap to UNEA 2 and considered that implementation of the environmental dimension of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the cornerstone of international development, should be the focus of this session. Pursuant to the mandate given by the decision 27/2, the committee prepared and considered an unprecedented number of resolutions and decisions for further deliberation and endorsement by the Assembly, all linked to the SDGs. Some themes were follow-up, as the illegal trade in bilag or sustainable production and consumption. Some new themes touching emerging environmental issues like natural capital protection of environment in conflict-affected areas or oceans and seas. Some are mandatory, as the medium-term strategy for 2018-2021 and the biennial program of work and budget for 2018-2019. Some themes are old, in discussion for longer period of time, like chemicals and waste. Some are focusing on transforming into action major international commitments, such as the resolution on the role of UNEP and UNEA in implementing the environmental dimension of the 2030 Agenda or implementing the climate change agreement. The debate was open and positive, supported by ongoing informal consultations to assure consensual outcome of issues. Nevertheless, we face some challenges, as the length of documents, communication with and inclusion of non-resident member states into negotiating process, reopening already agreed paragraphs, translation of documents into UN languages, or discussions on sensitive political matters. The committee almost completed some resolutions and left others unfinished, but this is the nature of an intergovernmental negotiation. In order to improve preparations for the next UNEA session, the committee recommends an analysis of relevant paragraphs of the rules of procedures, which, if amended, can increase the efficiency of negotiations in the intersessional period, such as considering setting up deadlines for the draft resolutions, or raising the efficiency of UNEA sessions by nominating the chair of the Committee of the Whole before the open-ended CPR to enable the person to prepare for the chairing. Or changing the timing of election of the UNEA Bureau. Now, besides the draft resolutions decisions of the committee basically considered the review, also the review of the UNEA cycle, and prepared options, different scenarios on shifting the assembly sessions, if it's so decided, from even to odd years in order to align the UNEA to the overall UN system. In its review of its financial, procedural, and political implications of the cycle change, the Honorable Assembly should consider the possible negative effects on the regional groups, specifically on duration of presidency. The committee also engaged in an informal process to discuss the scope, format, and content of a potential UNEA outcome document. In the absence of convergence on the format of the outcome document, whether it would be the President's summary or a political declaration negotiated document, the committee focused on identifying key and strong messages for the ministers in a concise, short document, in a meaningful, attractive manner, in a simple, accessible language to the citizens. The draft document and the compilation of the input of delegations, regional and political groups has been shared with you for your consideration. The mentioned draft documents were considered by member states during two very important and successful, may I say, sessions of the CPR. The third annual subcommittee meeting of the committee in October last year, and the second open-ended meeting of the CPR in February 2016. The last one witnessed, as already the Executive Director mentioned, a record participation of member states, over 300 delegates from 90 countries, including representatives of major groups and stakeholders. The level and the magnitude of participation, as well as the substantive debate, show the growing interest and recognition by the member states of the new global environmental platform created in 2014 and its universality. Negotiations continued in the intersessional period from open-ended CPR till the 134th meeting of the committee held on May 3rd, when delegation endorsed the package of documents, the result of our work, for your consideration and approval this week. I am confident, Mr. President, that the spirit of cooperation during the CPR meetings of finding universal solutions for universal issues will guide our debate this week. I am also convinced that the Assembly will be able to successfully finalize the remaining contentious issues in the true spirit of Nairobi, by consensus. The report of the committee, which presents a compilation of the minutes of its meeting in the last 2 years, is available online. Reference number UNEP/EA.2/EINF.25. Together with the draft resolutions and decisions for your approval, and it is available also online. Reference number UNEP/EA.1/L.1. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, UNEA is a new structure, new platform of global governance focused on identifying analyzing and developing universal solutions for global environmental issues to the benefit of all member states. It is our duty, I believe, to further strengthen it as the leading global authority in preserving the environment and health of this planet. By being courageous to have new initiatives, to accept new language, to generate new theories, policies, and projects, all which will make UNEA and UNEP a diverse, inclusive, and progressive institution globally. As I conclude my intervention, allow me to express my gratitude and admiration for the incredible work, excellent working environment created based on trust and cooperation of the CPR members, in particular my fellow Bureau members, ambassadors of Botswana, Pakistan and Brazil and their deputies, as well as to the Deputy Permanent Representative of Germany, who is our rapporteur. A sincere thank you goes out to the Secretariat and staff of UNEP. They produced an incredible amount of documents, briefing papers, and assisted us continuously. And last but not least, allow me, on behalf of the committee, to express my sincere appreciation to the outgoing Executive Director, Mr. Achim Steiner. Your legacy, Achim, is historic, and it will be measured probably in time. You have grown a strong and universal organization with capable and professional staff to continue your work and your passion. And you have set the pace for all of us for years to come, so thank you. And thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you, Ambassador Pataki, very much for the great work you all at the CPR have done. At this point, I would like to open the floor for interventions. First, I invite representatives of the political and regional groups, as well as economic and political integration entities, to briefly make remarks, followed by country delegations, and then major groups and other observers. I give the floor to the representative of Argentina on behalf of the G70, Group of 77 and China. Argentina.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. First and foremost, we wish to congratulate you and the other members of the Bureau for having been elected. The Group of 77 and China trust that with your expertise, you will lead this second United Nations Environment Assembly to a successful conclusion. Allow me also to express our gratitude to the government of Kenya for its warm hospitality. The group would also like to thank the Executive Director and UNEP Secretariat for the excellent preparation of this second UNEA. Member states of the G77 and China have actively participated in the preparatory process for UNEA 2, and we are committed to continuing our collaboration with you and the Secretariat and with other member states in order to make this meeting a success. We would like to thank the Secretariat for the financial support provided in order to allow for the participation of all member states, in particular developing countries, in this important meeting. Mr. President, this week we will have the opportunity to profit from an enlarged participation of ministers and high-level authorities, colleagues from our own capitals, representatives of UN agencies and of the private sector and civil society. As a result, this should enhance our debates and help us to position UNEA as the truly universal environmental forum. UNEA 2 has the opportunity to build upon the foundations of the international community agreed on. 2015 has been a historic year which has witnessed the adoption of the framework for disaster reduction, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, and last but not least, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Moreover, the Third United Nations Conference on Housing and Sustainable Development will convene in October to adopt a new human settlements agenda that complements the aforementioned agreements and completes a comprehensive framework for international sustainable development for the years to come. The group welcomes the main theme of UNEA 2, delivering on the 2030 agenda, and firmly believes that UNEP has a crucial role to play in supporting the implementation of all goals and targets within our own countries and at regional and global levels, taking into account different national realities, capacities, and levels of development, and respecting national policies and priorities. We cannot but stress once again that eradicating poverty in all its forms, including extreme poverty, is the greatest global challenge and an indispensable requirement for sustainable development. Both are deeply related and must be addressed through an integrated approach, applying the three dimensions of sustainable development in a balanced manner. This is the moment to make concrete progress towards the achievement of an inclusive economic and social development in harmony with nature. In doing so, it should be taken into account that there are different visions, approaches, and models to achieve environmental sustainability in the context of sustainable development. The group therefore looks forward to reflecting and elaborating the perspective of developing countries on such interlinkages. Furthermore, our group wishes to stress that the means of implementation contained in Goal 17 and in each and every goal are an integral part of the Sustainable Development Goals, which constitute an indivisible set as well as a fundamental component of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in their own right. For the group, means of implementation, including capacity building, technology transfer, and financial resources, remain among our top priorities. It is only through meaningful inclusion of these priorities in the global environmental agenda that developing countries will be able to meet their environmental obligations. We believe that UNEP has a major role to play in mobilizing human capacity and financial resources. Mr. President, the G77 and China is pleased that this second session of UNEA will provide our ministers with an opportunity to exchange views and experiences, which may contribute to the domestic, regional, and global decision-making processes. In this regard, we are of the view that the outcome document of UNEA 2 should capture the discussions and deliberations of the meeting, paving the necessary way towards the implementation of the environmental dimensions of the 2030 Agenda, while enhancing the Rio principles, in particular, the common but differentiated responsibilities. The intense negotiations which we will undertake in the next few days shall define the course for UNEP in the years to come. Rest assured of the full support of our group for the work of this important body. Mr. President, we stand ready to work constructively under your leadership during this session, and I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, G77 and China. Now I give the floor. And now I give the floor to the European Union, presided by the Netherlands.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I have the honor to deliver the statement on behalf of the EU and its 28 member states. Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Serbia, and Ukraine have aligned themselves with this statement. First of all, let me take the opportunity to express our appreciation to the government of Kenya for hosting the second meeting of the United Nations Environment Assembly. We also extend our sincere appreciation to the Executive Director, Mr. Achim Steiner, to the UNEP Secretariat, the Committee of Permanent Representatives, and to the UNEA Bureau for their hard work in preparing this session. And of course, indeed, to Mr. Steiner personally for his tireless commitment to UNEP and UNEA and the environmental dimension of sustainable development. The EU and its member states are pleased to see such a large number of delegates attending this session, and we are delighted that a high ministerial participation is expected during the high-level segment on Thursday and Friday. Together with the large variety of issues addressed in the resolutions to be agreed at this meeting, this reflects the crucial role of UNEA, and it reaffirms UNEP's strengthened mandate as the global environmental authority. Mr. President, the second session of UNEA convenes at an important moment in time. In 2015, the international community made remarkable breakthroughs. Last September, we adopted a 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development as a new, universal, transformational and integrated paradigm for sustainable development. Further, the Paris Climate Agreement represents a turning point in our fight against climate change. However, the most important work still remains to be done, putting these and other important commitments, including the multilateral environmental agreements, into practice. UNEA too is the perfect occasion for governments and relevant stakeholders from around the globe to demonstrate that they stand ready for the integrated, coordinated and effective implementation of these commitments. The outcome of this second session of UNEA should demonstrate and strengthen the roles of UNEP as the leading UN authority on the environment and UNEA as the collective voice for the environment in the implementation process. UNEP has to enhance its leading role to foster multilateral coordination for integration of environmental management, including among other UN agencies. Serious challenges remain for us as the international community. For instance, around 25% of the global burden of disease is environment-related nowadays. Further, environmental degradation may provoke serious consequences in terms of social and economic instability, including forced displacement. UNEA should therefore demonstrate that global action on a healthier planet is urgent, ensuring waste prevention and the sound management of chemicals and waste is an essential element in this. For the EU and its member states, it is also important that this UNEA promotes action to improve the marine environment, which will make a valuable contribution to achieving sustainable development. UNEA should commit to promoting sustainable consumption and production, which is relevant to achieving many of the SDGs, and demonstrate how the transition to a circular economy can contribute to sustainable economic growth and new jobs. Another priority for this week is concluding our discussion on UNEP's stakeholder engagement policy. At the open-ended CPR, we arrived at a good compromise, and with the necessary constructive spirit, we are confident that a final agreement can be reached this week. We attach a lot of value to flexible partnerships between UNEP and other UN organizations, but national governments, NGOs, the private sector, and other partners. The goals and targets of Agenda 2030 cannot be achieved without active participation of all relevant stakeholders. We need all actors, governments, science, industry and civil society alike to boost the efforts necessary for its implementation. We therefore look forward to the multi-stakeholder discussions as part of our meeting. In particular, partnerships will be essential for following up on the financial inquiry and making the financial system more sustainable and in mobilizing resources for sustainable investments. Regarding the preparation of resolutions for adoption at UNEA, a lot of ground has been covered in the intersessional period from open-ended CPR2, but still there is a big workload ahead of us in the coming days. The EU and its member states are ready to collaborate on this, building on the progress achieved so far and fostering consensus. Mr. President, the EU and its member states are committed to work together with other partners in ensuring that the best possible outcome for this second session of UNEA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, European Union. Now I give the floor to Egypt on behalf of the Africa Group.
Mr. President, Executive Director, and Deputy Executive Director, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the African Group, who would like to ally himself with the statement delivered by the Argentina on behalf of the G77 and China. First, allow me to congratulate His Excellency Mr. Edgar Gutierrez, Minister of Environment and Energy of Costa Rica, for his election as the President of the United Nations Environment Assembly at its second session, UNEA 2, as well as all the newly elected members of the Bureau. The African Group remains readily available to offer support to the new Bureau in performing its duties throughout the coming period. Allow me also, Mr. President, to pay tribute to His Excellency Oyun Sanjorson and to all the members of the outgoing Bureau for their outstanding work during the past 2 years. Mr. President, UNEA 2 convenes at a time of great relevance, especially in terms of the ongoing international efforts of achieving sustainable development. In this regard, Africa welcomes the overarching theme of UNEA 2, namely, delivering on the environmental dimension of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Last year, the international community adopted 3 important milestone agreements that will set the path for national and international efforts to attain sustainable development in the coming years. The 2030 Agenda lays out an ambitious framework for achieving sustainable development in its 3 dimensions: economic, social, and environmental. On the other hand, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda aims at addressing the challenges of financing and creating an enabling environment at all levels for sustainable development, in the spirit of global partnership and solidarity. While the Paris Agreement was adopted in recognition of the urgent and potentially irreversible threat that climate change presents to human societies and the planet. Finally, yet importantly, the 3rd International Conference for Housing and Sustainable Development is set to convene later this year to adopt an equally important and complementing new human settlements agenda. Mr. President, the African continent was and remained an integral part of these international efforts, since achieving sustainable development and alleviating poverty remains a top priority for Africa. In support of these efforts, the African Union, at its 24th Assembly in January 2015, adopted Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, and its first 10-year implementation plan, a shared strategic framework for inclusive growth and sustainable development for Africa. In furtherance of this, Africa has agreed to take measures to invest in strengthening and developing institutional and governance mechanisms, process and interventions of sustainable harnessing of its environmental assets, and reversing natural capital losses as part of the contributions to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Agenda 2063. To this end, the 6th special session of the AMSEN observed with concern that Africa's natural capital loss, estimated at approximately $195 billion annually, continues to undermine Africa's potential for achieving sustainable development and eradicating poverty. For this reason, in decision 1 of the special session on implementation of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Sustainable Development Goals and Africa Union's Agenda 2063, a contribution of natural capital, Africa Ministers of Environment agreed to, among others, create and strengthen partnerships in order to promote and inject investments that promote value added to the continent's natural capital. Mr. President, Africa welcomes the adoption of the Paris Agreement on climate change, as demonstrated by the number of African high-level officials attending the signing ceremony in New York last month. We reiterate our commitment to implement the agreement and call on the developed countries to provide timely, adequate, accessible, sustainable, and predictable means of implementation to developing countries. Africa recognizes ecosystem-based adaptation as an important approach to climate change adaptation, and is critical for attaining the SDGs and the 2030 Agenda. We thank UNEP and other partners for setting the stage in the establishment of the Ecosystem-Based Adaptation for Food Security Assembly in Africa, and look forward to the forum contributing towards the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, Agenda 2063, and the Paris Agreement. We also reaffirm the support of the African countries to the incoming COP22 presidency, Morocco, in their efforts to advance the implementation of the Paris outcome in a balanced, fair, and rules-based manner. Mr. Presidency, we are also concerned that some African countries continue to face challenges, including the long-lasting armed conflicts and instability in many areas, affected by the illegal activities of criminal groups that systematically exploit and trade in natural resources in areas affected by armed conflicts. The African Group requests UNEA's further commitment within its mandate to provide support to African states affected by the negative consequences of armed conflicts, environment loss, desertification, and land degradation in order to achieve the environmental dimension of 2030 Agenda. We commend UNEP's role in the UN system-wide response to illegal trade in wildlife and believe that this will help in raising awareness of the problems and risks associated with the supply of, transit in, and demand for illegal trade in wildlife. It is worth noting that the 17th Conference of Parties to the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora will be held in Johannesburg from 24 September to 5 October 2016, and we look forward to the full participation by the Member States in this conference. Mr. President, we are convinced that regional ministerial fora such as AMSEN and others should have a clear mandate and role in the work of UNEA, in view of evolving and complex nature of environmental issues. We believe that the mandate of the strengthened regional environmental ministerial fora should focus on, among others, promoting linkages between global environmental agenda with those at regional and national levels, as well as enhancing inter-regional cooperation to address environmental challenges of the world. We emphasize the need for strengthening UNEP's strategic regional presence in Africa to support member states and ensure the implementation of the 2030 Agenda in an integrated manner. Furthermore, we call for the capacity of UNEP to be enhanced to support the implementation of programs and projects at national and sub-regional level that address key environmental challenges. Mr. President, at its 6th special session in Cairo last month, AMSEN emphasized on the importance of the timely implementation of all previous UNEA and Governing Council decisions in an inclusive and comprehensive manner, and to enable the region to benefit from the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities of nations, a principle enshrined in a number of important international agreements and which Africa gives utmost importance. To this effect, Mr. President, we have closely followed the reports presented by the UNEP's Executive Director, Mr. Achim Steiner, especially on the status of the implementation of previous UNEA and Governing Council decisions, who will be making substantive inputs at the appropriate time during this session. Mr. President, finally, I would like to say that Africa reaffirms the importance of concluding the work of UNEA 2 high-level segment with an outcome document in the form of negotiated political declaration based on consensus. This outcome document should be concise, based on principles of sustainable development, including the common but differentiated responsibilities, and acknowledging the importance of providing the means of implementation, capacity building, technology transfer, and financial support to developing and least developed countries. Negotiations on this document should be transparent, inclusive, and taking into consideration the priorities and varying degrees of development amongst member states. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Africa. I give the floor to Argentina on behalf of GRULAC.
Gracias.
Thank you, President. It is an honor for Argentina to make this speech on behalf of the group of Latin American and Caribbean countries. GRULAC would like to welcome you and the members of the Bureau and congratulates you on your recent election. It is an honor for Costa Rica and Barbados to represent this region, and we believe that your experience will certainly be added value for the important discussions that we will be holding over the next few days. We are pleased by the financing given by UNEA to many developing countries, which means that today they are represented here. Our region has a reduced number of permanent missions in Nairobi. We welcome all of them, and we hope that they will have a fruitful week of debates ahead of them. We are aware of the fact that UNEA 2 will be a landmark in terms of participation, both at governmental level and in the various major groups and stakeholders. We hope that the exchanges, including the dialogue that ministers and high authorities will engage in the high-level segment, will look carefully at the implementation of the 2030 agenda and the role that UNEP must play, and acknowledge the importance of the promotion of different approaches, visions, models, and instruments in line with circumstances and priorities at a national level to achieve sustainable development in its 3 dimensions. This UNEA 2 will undoubtedly define relevant issues for the work of UNEP, and it should also contribute to the implementation of the commitments undertaken by the international community in the area of sustainable development, both at a global level, at a regional level, and nationally. The results of UNEA 2 must respect UNEP's mandate and avoid going beyond the remit of the program, and at the same time, we must preserve the intergovernmental nature of the forum. In this regard, we stress the need to continue bolstering regional offices and sub-regional offices, not only during the preparatory period, but also during the implementation and follow-up to the decisions and resolutions that will be adopted. On the organizational structure for this week, we would stress the need to work in no more than 2 parallel sessions simultaneously with the plenary. This would ensure that small delegations would have the opportunity to take an active part in all the meetings. President, our region had the opportunity to hold the 20th meeting of the Environment Ministers in Gulak during the intersessional period, this was held in Cartagena in Colombia. We would like to highlight some of the agreements that were made during the meeting. We would stress the need to have means of implementation which would be free of conditioning so that we can comply with the mandate given by international agreements in the area of sustainable development and the environment, including new and additional financial resources. They must be stable and predictable. The capacity building and technology transfer, which must be environmentally sound. We would reaffirm our commitment to comply with what is said in the 2030 agenda in terms of sustainable development in order to eradicate poverty, protect the environment, and promote economic and social development which is inclusive in harmony with nature. We acknowledge that the implementation of the goals under the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development require the effective, constant support of developed countries to developing countries. Gulak is highly vulnerable. Our region is highly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change. We would call for policies to be drafted so that they can meet our needs for adaptation and mitigation, in line with the principle of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities. We would draw attention to the specific vulnerabilities and the circumstances of small island developing states and the Central American Isthmus with regard to their environmental sustainability, and we would ask for them to be incorporated in UNEA 2 debates. Because they remain a special case for sustainable development, considering their specific vulnerabilities and their limited means of achieving all the sustainable development goals in light of their condition. At the same time, we must recognize that it will be necessary to engage in international cooperation to overcome the challenges faced by SIDS, and indeed the Central American Isthmus as well. We acknowledge the fact that we need to redouble efforts in order to conserve and sustainably take advantage of biodiversity within the framework of respecting the sovereignty of states in the use of their natural resources. We support the government of Mexico as the presidency and host of COP13 of the Convention on Biodiversity, in particular when it comes to promoting actions towards the integration of the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. Finally, we would like to thank the Executive Director and the Secretariat for their work and for the excellent organization of this second session. We would like to reaffirm our region's unwavering commitment to generate substantive results, to define strategies and actions for the environment, and in order to achieve the future that we want for current and future generations. GRULAC is grateful for the great work undertaken by the Executive Director, Achim Steiner, over the last 10 years, and we acknowledge the fact that under his leadership, UNEP has been able to strengthen itself, and UNEA is the Global Environment Forum. Thank you very much, President.
Gracias, GRULAC.
Thank you, GRULAC.
To Sri Lanka on behalf of the group of 15. And I understand that this is the last group that will to intervene in this morning. Sri Lanka.
Mr. President, Executive Director of UNEP, Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Group of 15, a summit-level group of developing countries that aim for mutually beneficial cooperation and collaboration while realizing sustainable development and economic progress. Our group is deeply pleased to be associated with the second United Nations Environment Assembly. The G15 believes that the UNEA is an important world body that places environmental issues at the heart of international affairs and provides fresh impetus to tackle growing global challenges. The first UNEA in 2014 marked a milestone in the 4-decade-long journey to accord environmental issues the same status as the challenges to peace, security, finance, health and trade. Our group particularly welcomes this year's theme, delivering on the environmental dimensions of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is the most opportune as humanity commences on its latest journey towards sustainable development while balancing the environmental, social, and economic dimensions. This forum has provided the first global platform for reviewing progress on sustainable development goals since their adoption last year, particularly their environmental facets. This thematic process will allow all relevant actors to identify concrete tools available to take an integrated and universal approach to the implementation of the SDGs, including those related to critical areas such as air quality, healthy ecosystems, marine debris, chemicals and waste, and others that may emerge in the preparatory process, as well as to develop strategic multi-stakeholder partnerships to address ongoing and emerging environmental issues. We are a group which believes that the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is as a plan of action for the people, planet, and prosperity, built on the three pillars of social, economic, and environment of the SDGs. The foreign ministers of our group have identified the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development as a key global process for the G15 to be involved and contribute to its implementation as a niche group of the Global South. As the 2030 Agenda comes into effect this year, renewing global norms for development in the next 15 years, we welcome this timely discussion in this August Assembly. In recent years, our group has constructively engaged with international organizations, particularly those based in Geneva, and actively involved in the shaping of global process such as development agenda. In the 2015, the G15 in collaboration with the South Center engaged with 14 international organizations involved in post-2015 development. In a series of 3 symposia, one was completely dedicated to discuss the environmental facets of the development agenda. The G15 in February 2016 held follow-up symposium on implementation of the 2030 agenda, which was open to all countries of the Global South. We are also happy to note that the G15 has taken active part in other global processes associated with the development agenda, in particular in the agenda, Addis Ababa Action Agenda for Financing for Development, Sandy Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. The G15 also notes that nearly half of the 2030 agenda's 17 SDGs focus on the environment or the sustainability of natural resources. This includes the goals on poverty, health, food and agriculture, water and sanitation, human settlements, energy, climate change, sustainable consumption and production, oceans and terrestrial ecosystem. Mr. President, Excellencies, the G15 calls for greater cooperation in capacity building and technology transfers, especially in promoting green technologies and renewable energy. The use of renewable energy can improve the security, diversity, and overall reliability of national energy systems. Particularly in developing countries, renewables can also ensure the vital link between electrification and economic security. These can provide solutions to larger environmental and social issues such as energy access, food security, health, job creation, and others, resulting in a healthier environment and a healthier people. In conclusion, the G15 acknowledges the important role that needs to be played by the United Nations Environment Programme in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, especially towards reaching relevant environmental targets. As a group of developing countries, the G15 remains ready for further enhanced cooperation with the UNEP and other agencies in achieving this shared goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Group of 15. I now give the floor to country representatives. I remind all delegations to keep their statements to 5 minutes because we need to conclude this session by 1 o'clock. At the moment, we have 7 countries plus representatives of major groups and stakeholders, so please be very efficient with your time. I give the floor now to Pakistan.
Thank you. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to begin by congratulating the Government of the Republic of Kenya and the United Nations Environment Programme for making UNEA 2 possible. We also pay tribute to the outgoing UNEA Bureau and welcome the incoming members. Needless to say, we also believe that Oxford's gain is our loss. Mr. Steiner will long be remembered for his services. Mr. President, Pakistan is endowed with different ecological regions, including Karakoram and Hindu Kush mountain ranges, coastal zone, and the floodplains of the river Indus and its tributaries. The rangelands and coastal zones have contributed to development of livestock and fishing industries. The mountainous, riverine, and mangrove forests have provided vital ecological services, protected watersheds, and maintained soil productivity. The floodplains of River Indus and the irrigated farmlands are a virtual breadbasket for the country. Climate change has exacerbated the challenges faced by the delicately balanced ecosystems of Pakistan. The most critical is aridity combined with the dependence on a single river system, the Indus, which supports one of the largest irrigation systems of the world. Agricultural contributes over 21% of GDP and employs 45% of the labor force. Environmental management is essential for Pakistan to balance economic and ecological imperatives. Like other developing countries, Pakistan faces serious environmental problems attributable to economic and demographic growth that have strained the country's natural resource base. The pressure for rapid socio-economic development and population growth have placed great stress on natural resources, besides creating significant local pollution. Pakistan's core environmental challenges, therefore, are natural resource degradation and pollution, especially of urban areas. Our dilemma is to balance economic growth and environmental protection. There is a realization that environmental degradation, if not checked, can stultify economic growth. To tackle the interrelated challenges of sustainable use of natural resources, deforestation, land degradation, environmental concerns have to be mainstreamed into the development process to make it sustainable. This would help truly address unsustainable patterns of consumption and production, resource mismanagement, inefficient waste management, as well as unsustainable forest, land, and water utilization. Mr. President, according to World Bank estimates, the daily cost incurred by Pakistan due to environmental and natural resource damage is 1 billion rupees. Needless to say, the vulnerable members of society bear the major brunt. Notwithstanding the severity of the challenges, which are complicated by the ongoing counterterrorism efforts, the government of Pakistan has taken policy and institutional initiatives for their mitigation. Some major achievements are development of national environmental policy, national sanitation policy, clean development mechanism strategy, draft national forest policy, national action program to combat desertification, and biodiversity action plan for Pakistan, etc. Pakistan's Vision 2025, our future-oriented and growth-centric roadmap, clearly recognizes sustainable development and climate change as priority areas for effective action by the government. Mr. President, Pakistan is fully alive to the opportunity accorded by UNEA 2. We have remained actively engaged in the preparatory process and assure you of our fullest cooperation for a successful outcome. We would like to reiterate that the environmental challenges facing us require a unified stance that entails rising above narrow agendas. Let us seize the moment lest the coming generations accuse us of choosing complacency over critical action. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I give the floor to the United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. President. Please let me first congratulate you and the Bureau on your election and say that we look forward to supporting and working with you in the days ahead. We would also like to thank outgoing President Oyen Sanyasurin and her Bureau for the excellent work that they have performed in the last 2 years. We are both pleased and excited to be here at the second UN Environment Assembly. Much has happened since the first UNEA 2 years ago. We now have the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, financing for development, and the Paris Agreement on climate change. Truly, 2015 was a watershed. We're here now with a different agenda. Our task now is to undertake the real work to implement all that we have agreed. And it is implementation that should be our focus moving forward. This is one reason, for example, that we have submitted a resolution on reducing food waste in support of Target 12.3 to reduce food loss and reduce food waste by 50% by 2030. In the United States, we've also made a national commitment to this end, announced by EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy. In this regard, I note that if food waste were a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. We believe that UNEP has achieved important successes, and we are here to help further UNEP's efforts to address the urgent and compelling environmental problems confronting all of us. Problems like air quality, like reducing toxic chemicals such as mercury and lead, and like safeguarding the ocean. These are all efforts, in our view, to protect human health from environmental degradation. We are encouraged at this meeting to see the regional reports of the Global Environmental Outlook, and we look forward to celebrating the global report early in 2018. We appreciate UNEP's efforts to overcome continuing challenges with the Umoja enterprise system implementation that have led to delays in regular financial reporting this year. Bringing UN business practice into the modern digital age is no easy task, but the benefits will be inevitably bring greater transparency, accountability, and efficiency, which are critical for ensuring the future efficacy and relevance of the United Nations. As a result, we hope that UNEP will provide member states with more clarity on its financial status. We're particularly curious to know where we stand in terms of contributions to the Environment Fund, since universal membership does not yet appear to have led to the broadening and deepening of UNEP's donor base with regard to voluntary, non-earmarked contributions. The United States remains committed to supporting the approval of a new stakeholder engagement policy for UNEA, but as called for at Rio Plus 20, the world demands that it be decidedly progressive and not a step backward from the current status quo. New development actors continue to emerge, and governments are no longer the main sources of finance or technology for development. The future relevance of UNEA, UNEP, and the entire UN development system hangs in the balance if we cannot find a way to embrace and effectively utilize the vast resources of new actors more effectively. There are many resolutions to negotiate at UNEA 2, some of them quite lengthy, and we have an extremely short amount of time. We appreciate the efforts that have been made during the interim discussions after the OECPR to streamline and focus some of these resolutions. For several resolutions, there is additional scope to shorten and focus on key areas that will provide direction to UNEP on ways to enhance its activities. We look forward to working with other delegations in the coming days to advance these resolutions in a positive, practical, and efficient way. In our view, and in light of the heavy agenda, there is no need for a negotiated ministerial outcome document. We believe that a chair's summary will much more effectively capture and convey the multiplicity of views and concerns of all members. Regarding the proposal to change the UNEA meeting cycle from even to odd years, we understand the benefits of doing so, but we are not entirely convinced that the benefits outweigh the relatively high financial cost of holding an additional UNEA meeting. It is still unclear where the extra funds would come from. As we examine the timing of UNEA meetings, we are also interested in discussing with others the timing of UNEA in the calendar year. It strikes us that the end of May is a particularly busy and crowded time for delegations closely following broader sustainable development issues, and we would be interested in hearing from other delegations their perspectives on moving UNEA further up in the calendar year to perhaps February or March. Finally, we wish to thank the UNEP Secretariat for all of its efforts in organizing this meeting. We know the enormous task, and we appreciate all of the work that has been done. And we thank in particular our Executive Director, Achim Steiner, or should I say Dean Steiner, as he will soon become, for his work over the past 10 years. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, United States. Now I have on the screen Sudan, Mexico, Japan, Switzerland, Bolivia, Samoa, League of Arab States, major groups, children, as a major group, children and youth, after which I propose that we close the list of speakers for this agenda item.
Iraq.
Please, Iraq now. All right, thank you. Now I give the floor to Sudan, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this speech on behalf of my minister, who could not able to attend this session because of unavoidable circumstances, but he will be sure to attend the conference at a later stage. Mr. President, let me at the outset express our appreciation for the great job that has been done by the outgoing President and its Bureau. And take the same opportunity to congratulate you as a new President for this UNEA 2, wishing you a remarkable success in your tenure. And also I'd like to thank all those who contributed to make an effort to bring this second UNEA under the theme of delivering on 2030 agenda a successful event, including the host Kenya. Mr. President, international environmental policy and governance issues under 2030 agenda are diverse, but the selective subjects to be addressed in this UNEA 2 are really very important issues, starting from ecosystem degradation issues, passing through illegal trade in wildlife, pollutions ended by weak monitoring and management system. In this picture, that UNEA 2 drew a member states and need very strong designations to be adopted by member state and coherent structure to be implemented. The use and management of the ecosystem in developing countries requires institutional structures that can effectively facilitate the necessary coordination within and between the different sectors and stakeholders in order to achieve sustainable natural resources use and maintain the balance of the ecosystem. Surely this will be the case when we discuss the issues of the ecosystem degradations. There are many initiatives addressing the root causes of desertification and land degradation. The most severe problem destroyed the ecosystem in sub-Saharan countries. Those initiatives are expected also to contribute to poverty alleviation in the long term. The eradication of poverty through improved agricultural production is among Sudan's primary development objectives. Poverty is deeply enriched in rural areas, home to over 20 million people living on less than €1 a day. Sudan's diverse agroecological zones and abundant surface water offers the potential to produce a range of crops as well as livestock. Yet, production remaining consistently quite low due to an agriculture system that is not well adapted to rainfall variability and prolonged drought events. I believe this is the case in the most of the African countries. Mr. President, the Wildlife Administration in Sudan has significant partnership with respect to the management and assessment of nature reserves and the status of the forest and tree habitats. Villages living near nature reserves have a close association with the flora and fauna and forest based on their way of living, which play an important part in their daily lives. But the past few decades have witnessed a major assault on wildlife and their habitat. In northern and central Sudan, for example, the greatest damage has been inflicted by habitat destruction and fragmentation from farming and deforestation, and as well climate changes. Larger wildlife numbers have essentially disappeared and are now mostly confined to core protected area and remote desert regions. Demand-driven researches to be conducted to provide answers to real concern of the people in all countries, including rural people who are traditionally have not been able to voice their needs for sustainable rural development. Research needs in areas such as wealth creation, production system, dynamics, agricultural intensification through integrated agroforestry technologies, rationalizations, and intensification of livestock management models, promotion of small-scale aquaculture through stocking of water for fish farming. Promoting science policy at all levels will make the above concept resilient. Mr. President, lastly, as you know, Sudan and Namibia proposed a draft resolution regarding combating desertification, land degradation, and sustainable management of a rangeland, which is supported by the all African countries in the 6th special session of AMCEN last April in Cairo. As we are going to explain this resolution during the next sessions, we are also negotiating with other countries to accommodate other areas in the same proposal. Looking forward to adopt this resolution by the member states. I wish fruitfully meeting for you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. México tiene la palabra.
Mexico has the floor. Thank you very much, President. Mr. Edgar Gutierrez, Minister of the Environment and Energy of Costa Rica. Mr. Achim Steiner, Executive Director of UNEP. Distinguished ministers, vice ministers, and authorities of member states, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, Mexico would like to welcome you to the helm of the UNEA Bureau, as well as Barbados as Vice President representing the region of Latin America and the Caribbean. And we would also like to welcome the other members of the Bureau who have just been elected. The delegation of Mexico would like to endorse fully what was said by Argentina on behalf of GRULAC. This second assembly is being held in the wake of recent successes of multilateralism in environmental matters. For example, the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the signing of the Paris Climate Agreement, inter alia. UNEP has a fundamental role to play in dealing with various challenges, some of which are well known and some of which are just emerging. It is the principal authority for global policies in the international environmental agenda. UNEP will also play a key role in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, working with the rest of the United Nations system to ensure the effective integration of the environmental pillar in the new development framework. The agreements and decisions that will result from this week's work need to be consistent and relevant around the overarching goal of this assembly, and they need to set out a substantive pathway towards the forthcoming UNEA sessions. Mr. President, the intersessional period after the second meeting of the open-ended Committee of Permanent Representatives led to progress in the negotiations on various resolutions thanks to the leadership of Ambassador Julia Pataki, President of the Bureau of the Committee of Permanent Representatives. However, there are still some outstanding issues to be ironed out. Nevertheless, we are certain that common interest for the success of this meeting will allow the drafting groups to work hard to achieve consensus and to allow for the adoption of resolutions and other documents in a constructive spirit. Mexico believes that this assembly needs to adopt a political declaration to highlight the political commitment of member states when it comes to the various issues on the agenda this week. Messages need to be sent loud and clear to reflect the priorities of this UNEA II meeting. My country also believes that civil society organizations are key necessary partners so that we governments are successful in the implementation of the various environmental commitments, including the Sustainable Development Agenda. For that reason, Mexico hopes that the policy on the participation of stakeholders can be agreed on during this UNEA and will ensure broad participation, bearing in mind the intergovernmental nature and the inclusive nature of this assembly. Mr. President, I would also like to say that Mexico will host the 13th Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity in December this year. For my country, the issue of the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity is of paramount importance. That is why we are presenting a resolution for adoption during this assembly. And we have also organized parallel events under this theme. We would invite all members to join efforts to achieve this common goal. Before concluding, the delegation of Mexico would like to reiterate the need for the universal nature of UNEA to be underlined, including the due representation of all member states and the interpretation of sessions and the translation of working documents into the 6 official languages of the United Nations. This will allow the inclusivity and involvement of all delegations to facilitate our work. Mr. President, rest assured that the delegation of Mexico will play a constructive role in order to ensure that this second assembly is a success. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, México.
Thank you very much, Mexico.
To Japan.
Good morning. Thank you for giving me the floor. First of all, on behalf of the government of Japan, I'd like to express our heartfelt congratulations to Mr. President for your new appointment, while giving our appreciation to the outgoing President. And also taking this opportunity, I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to Dr. Akim Steiner for his outstanding achievement for his 10 years tenure. And also, without that, we should express our appreciation to the government of Kenya for being a host country today represented by Her Excellency Cabinet Secretary Judy Kwang. My pronunciation is correct, I hope. And ladies and gentlemen, recognizing the importance of UNEA 2 to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, Japan reaffirms its robust support for UNEP, with the expectation UNEP will further exercise its initiative as the leading global environmental authority in the UN. After the Rio +20, we as member states of UNEP have been tackling emerging global environmental issues such as marine plastic debris, life cycle control of chemicals and waste, promotion of air quality, and environmental law. Last week, Japan hosted the G7 Environment Ministerial meeting in Japan. The 2030 Agenda was one of the main topics of that meeting, and we believe that the outcome of this G7 meeting, including its discussion on resource efficiency and 3 Rs and marine leader, will be beneficial in achieving respective environment-related SDGs. Japan regards it vital to gather all of our achievements since the previous UNEA on emerging issues into a common story under the theme of implementing the environmental aspect of the 2030 Agenda. To that end, Japan would like to play a positive role during the course of this UNEA 2. Japan also has contributed and will continue to cooperate with UNEP on specific projects. Last year, the UNEP International Environmental Technology Center, with support of Japan, compiled a new global outlook on waste management and a new guideline on integrated waste management framework legislation. In this connection, Japan is proposing a resolution on sound management of chemicals and waste with Mongolia, the EU, and Burkina Faso, as well as organizing a side event on waste management on the 24th of May at noon. Japan would like to continue to support UNEP's activities in this field. With our knowledge, experience, and technology aiming at effective implementation of the 2030 Agenda and its environmental dimension. Last but not least, I would like to touch upon the progress made in the improvement of UNEP's program of work and budget. Japan welcomes the introduction of result-based budgeting and outcome mapping approaches, which facilitate assessment and evaluation before and after the program and budget planning. We stand for further effective, realistic, and transparent operation of the UNEP activities, and we are ready to contribute to the discussion in this regard. Let me conclude my remarks by congratulating this opening session and wishing all success to our endeavors in the following days in the UNEA too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Japan. I give the floor to Switzerland.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Executive Director, Excellencies and dear colleagues. Let me first congratulate you, Mr. President, and all the Bureau members for your election. We look forward to work with all of our partners under your skillful guidance. Let me also indicate that Switzerland is very proud to participate at this UNEA 2. With UNEA 2, another major step becomes normal in the evolution of the process of strengthening international environmental governance and UNEP as anchor institution of international environmental governance and policy. Switzerland is deeply committed to a strong and politically relevant UNEP which is effectively and efficiently fulfilling its important mandate with regard to providing the scientific information needed to understand the global environmental challenge, providing overarching policy guidance and advancing the political framework to address these challenges, and with regard to promoting and stimulating implementation of the policies needed. UNEP has grown over the last years. One person who has crucially contributed to this positive evolution is clearly UNEP's Executive Director, Achim Steiner. Let me thank you, Achim, for your visionary leadership of this important institution, which is so dear to us and which is so important to the world. Your personal commitment was crucial to bring economic at the top of the international agenda. And under your leadership, UNEP was developing important policy instruments such as the Minamata Convention on Mercury. And thanks to you, the environment had a charismatic and visionary voice and face. Let me thank you wholeheartedly. Let me also briefly address some of the issues which UNEA 2 should provide, on which UNEA 2 should provide guidance. One of the very important issues to be addressed will be to bring UNEP's working cycle in line with the rest of the UN. And let me briefly respond to the US intervention. Switzerland would support advancing and moving UNEA in future to the February. We should use this opportunity also to change the timing of election of the UNEA Bureau. The Bureau should be elected at the end of each session to be able to prepare the next session for which it will be in charge. Similarly important will be the decision on the relationship between UNEP and MEAs to ensure that UNEP and MEAs support each other mutually rather than compete with each other. As anchor institution of the global environmental regime, UNEP is ideally positioned to provide the Secretary's functions for MEAs. This provides strength, vision, and political visibility in the UN system. We have to ensure that this support by UNEP to MEAs is adequate, effective and efficient and provides real added value to the work of MEAs. UNEP brings MEAs to a family. It can support their work with scientific information and awareness raising, and it strengthens MEA by anchoring them in the UN system. UNEA too should also clarify the important role UNEP plays with regard to the 2030 Agenda and SDGs. UNEP is in the best position to contribute to the further development of relevant indicators, and UNEP is similarly best positioned to report on the state of the environment and the environmental dimension of sustainable development and of the SDGs. With regard to the substantive areas, UNEA too should make sure that the important work on microplastics and marine litter continues and promote a good coordination and cooperation between relevant institutions. UNEA too should continue to support and promote the work on enhancing synergies between biodiversity-related MEAs, and UNEA too should support the work for more coordinated reporting under the chemicals and waste MEAs, give guidance to the global chemicals outlook, and ensure that the important work on lead and cadmium continues. Finally, Switzerland does believe that the important decisions and resolutions which we are going to negotiate and adopt should be complemented by a ministerial statement reflecting the ministers' common political vision and commitment with regard to the environment. Let me conclude that my delegation is looking forward to work with all our partners in a constructive and solution-oriented manner over the whole week to make sure that UNEA 2 will be a success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Switzerland. Now, tiene la palabra.
I give the floor to the plurinational state of Bolivia. A very good afternoon, President, distinguished delegates. First of all, I would like to say that Bolivia fully endorses what was said by our representatives of G77 and GULAC. We also appreciate the fact that UNEA 2 is being held in Africa, in Nairobi, Kenya. I would like to wish the very best success to the UNEA presidency, and I would also like to say that in the exercise of the presidency and in the negotiating processes, I believe that balance must reign. We would like also to air a concern that some of the working documents and the proposals for draft resolutions and draft decisions, there is a biased trend towards the green economy, the so-called green economy. We would like to express a strong reservation in terms of the referration to putting a price on the components of Mother Earth. The commercialization and the so-called payment for services, for environmental services, is expressed as the only or exclusive solution to environmental problems. We would like to express a strong reservation about that. We would also very cordially like to request that the agreed texts be respected, the Rio Plus 20 texts, and also the texts which were agreed on in UNEA 1, Resolution 110, which acknowledges that every single country in the world has different approaches, different visions, different models and instruments. Not just the green economy, we have different models to achieve environmental sustainability in the context of attaining sustainable development and eradicating poverty. In line with our circumstances, and our national priorities. The delegation of Bolivia would like to express complete commitment to make progress in the concrete implementation of the environmental dimension within the context of the SDGs. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Bolivia.
Thank you very much, Bolivia.
I give the floor to Samoa.
Mr. President, Talo Falava, Samoa congratulates you on your election as President of the UNEA 2. We also acknowledge the invaluable contribution of the outgoing President. As a small island state, Samoa is pleased to note the election of Barbados and Costa Rica into the Bureau. May we also commend the tremendous work by Mr. Steiner in leading UNEP in the last 10 years. We also extend our gratitude for the warm hospitality of the government and people of Kenya, as well as the UNEP for the opportunity to be here on the occasion of the second UNEA. Like many of you here today, we have traveled a considerable distance to be here, and we continue to traverse great distances to ensure the voice of our people and our community are heard, our issues addressed, and because we want to be part of a global solution for a greener and healthier people and planet. Mr. President, Samoa sponsored the draft resolution on the Samoa Pathway as a means to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, because as the host and chair of the third SEEDS conference, we are fully committed to ensuring that Samoa Pathway is implemented through the integration into the work of the UN bodies and agencies such as UNEP. We acknowledge the support of member states through constructive feedback and dialogue, particularly through the open-ended CPR in February of this year, as reflected in the extent of the agreement reached during the open-ended CPR negotiations. The resolution highlights the interconnectedness between Samoa Pathway and SDGs. As small countries with limited resources and capacities, compounded by our vulnerability to impacts of climate change, we have no choice but to be smart and innovative in the way we do things. Finally, Mr. President, Samoa stand ready to engage with all member states to agree on the final text of this draft resolution. We hope through the continued goodwill and spirit of collaboration among member states that we will reach an agreement here at UNEA 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Samoa. I now give the floor to Iraq.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Allow me, on behalf of my country, we wish to convey my best congratulations for you, hoping for you the best wishes in your presidency. Allow me, Mr. President, also to convey our thanks to Her Excellency Mr. Yon and to Dr. Hakim Steiner, who do the best in the previous period. Allow me to speak in Arabic in my speech. السيد الرئيس السيدات والسادة.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to UNEA 2, and I would like to congratulate all the new members of the Bureau. And I would also like to congratulate Oyun and all of the members of the former Bureau for the work they undertook. I would like to thank Mr. Steiner for his role at the helm of our meetings and also his role in the organization. And I would also like to thank the Asia Group for renewing their confidence in my country. We would like to underscore the efforts made by member states during the previous period in terms of drafting the documents and the results of the Committee of Permanent Representatives. Ms. Julia Panaki, who chaired the committee, was always present, and in terms of the draft resolution, we hope to adopt the resolutions on the protection of the environment in conflict areas. I myself come from a country that is threatened by the Daesh organization, and indeed chemical weapons have been used in some areas. I am also pleased to speak about the draft resolutions that are available in terms of making an amendment to the years on which the UNEA will be held. We would like to understand the reasoning for that. Then when it comes to sandstorms on that issue, which has led to various initiatives being rolled out, wildlife is also affected by these and other scourges in our country and our region. We will deal with all of these issues. On climate change, Iraq, of course, took part in COP21 in Paris, which led to the Paris Climate Agreement. And we will continue to work on that. We would like to underscore the collective responsibility as being one of the key principles from 1992 in Rio. We don't have any reservations about the outcome document in terms of the articles relating to the ministerial declaration, but we would say that it does need to refer to sandstorms. Sandstorms needs to be clearly reflected because countries such as ours are affected by that. Thank you.
Thank you, Iraq. Now I give the floor to League of Arab States, and I have in the list as well Indonesia, Kiribati, and as a major group, children and the youth, and the list is closed. Thank you. Iraq, no, I'm sorry, League of the Arab States.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, President. At the outset, I would also like to congratulate you, sir, on your election to the Bureau. The Bureau of UNEA 2. I would like to wish you full success as you go about your work. On behalf of the League of Arab States, I would like to thank Oyun for chairing the work undertaken during UNEA 1. We would also like to express thanks to Mrs. Pataki and all the members of the Committee of Permanent Representatives. We would like to thank them for their hard work, because they were able to undertake all the work that they were entrusted with. Ladies and gentlemen, UNEA 2 is being held in an international framework which is changing. UNEA 1 was a meeting in which the foundations were laid, with the 3 environmental dimensions at the fore. And we underlined their relationship with developmental issues. Now we have UNEA 2 at a time when the world is in upheaval. We have the adoption of the 2030 Agenda, we have seen the adoption of the Paris Climate Agreement, and we can be in no doubt that the foundations that have been laid are also robust to allow us to make progress in our work. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we should like also to express our agreement with the development dimension when it comes to the environment, as that being the overarching slogan of UNEA 2. We believe that these issues are of critical importance, and the relationship between health and the environment is another very important issue. and this will be dealt with, of course, by ministers. We would once again like to express our full interest in the developments of this second session. We are also very pleased and proud to be present at this meeting, and we will play an active role in the deliberations that will take place. And I do hope that the deliberations that we will have will lead to a roadmap which will bear in mind all of the complexities of the issues at hand. And I also hope that the roadmap will meet our people's expectations. Finally, I would like to thank the Executive Director, Mr. Achim Steiner, because he has managed to put environmental issues at the heart of our concerns at a regional and international level. I would like to pay tribute to his work for the environment, and I wish him the very best of success in his new function. I would also like to thank the UNEP Secretariat for all the efforts that they have made and for organizing today's meeting very well. Thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Thank you. Please, Indonesia, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, allow me first and foremost to congratulate you as the new President of Bureau of the UNEA Session 2. I believe that under your able leadership, you will successfully guide this session to its conclusion. I would like to align my statement with the statement made by Argentina on behalf of G77 and China. Indonesia views UNEA as the pertinent forum to address the global environmental affairs. Let me recall that during our deliberation on the preparation of the UNEA 2, wide-ranging issues related to the environment came to our attention, such as chemicals and waste, marine plastic debris and microplastics, sustainable coral reef management, climate change, sustainable consumption and production, illegal trade in wildlife and wildlife product, as well as UNEP Medium-Term Strategy 2018-2021 as the important document to implement. This year, we are stepping into a new era, as last year, our leaders adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and environment has been one of the three dimensions of the Sustainable Development Goals that gives us confidence that our works here are highly important. We need to link our works and to synergize them to the implementation of SDGs, especially to the related goals of the environmental issues. Data and facts from many sources indicate that there is a close and clear linkage between environmental degradation, polluted air, soil, and water that impact the human health. We need to have a concrete action to deliberate and link it to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We do believe that effectiveness in tackling environment issues cannot be separated from a number of important factors, such as strong support and commitment from political leaders, multi-layer partnership and collaboration, good governance, a right approach through promoting science-based policy, and availability of sound technology as well as mobilized resources. Thus, we have to ensure that all of these elements and sustainable development goals are included as guidance for our common efforts. We have this expectation that the outcome of the high-level segment of UNEA 2 will become concrete efforts and can be realized to fulfill our commitment on the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals that relate to the environmental matters. Mr. President, with regard to the UNEA cycle, Indonesia is of the view that thorough analysis must be conducted in order to make it in line with the UN biannual budget. And it is imperative that UNEA 3 must optimize the existing regular budget. Related to the ocean and biodiversity issues, Indonesia has submitted its proposal on the sustainable coral reef management. Coral reefs plays a significant role in social, economic, and environmental aspects for millions of people who are living in coastal areas. Despite its importance, coral reef is facing numerous serious threats both locally and globally. Through this resolution, we wish that sustainable management of coral reefs would give significant contribution to the conservation of the marine biodiversity as the way to achieve Goal 14 of SDGs. In this regard, we wish that UNEA 2 would support our draft resolution. We thank the governments of Norway, Palau, Australia, the Philippines, Monaco, and Maldives for their co-sponsorship. Finally, I would like to invite all member countries to participate in the side event organized by the government of Indonesia in collaboration with the UNEP Secretariat. The Sustainable Coral Reef Management event will be on Tuesday, tomorrow, in Conference Room 11 from 1 to 2:30 p.m. We believe that this side event can provide a better insight on the current global condition of the coral reefs and the way forward to conserve and sustainably use the ecosystem. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now I give the floor to Kiribati.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, since this is the first time for Kiribati taking the floor, allow me, Mr. President, to thank the past president of UNEA for her leadership over the last 2 years, and congratulate you, Costa Rica, for your election as president of UNEA 2. Allow me also to thank Akim Steiner for his 10 years of dedication in bringing UNEP and UNEA to what it is today. Climate change remains high on the political agenda for the new government of Kiribati, and it's not only Kiribati's biggest sustainable development issue, but to us it is existential. We are a coral atoll nation, so our survival depends on the health of our coral atolls that are under threat from the impacts of climate change, such as ocean warming and acidification, saltwater intrusion, and extreme events. Kiribati deeply appreciates the efforts of global community to address climate change, especially the Paris Agreement, but we all know that more has to be done, and we need long-term commitments. We have limited capacity and need continuous capacity building, and in most cases, we need to rely on external technical assistance. Access to climate financing continues to be a big challenge. Oceans management is an area where Kiribati has tried to lead. Our declaration on the Phoenix Islands Protected Areas, PIPA, was at the time groundbreaking. It's inspired the development of the Pacific Oceanscape Framework, regional framework for the cooperation on oceans management. We need our partners to support and respect our efforts to maintain the health of our ocean and marine resources, not only for Kiribati, but the world as a whole. The enforcement of PIPA, restricting on fisheries access, illegal fishing is one of our biggest challenges in achieving the goals and objectives of PIPA. Last but not least, I wish to thank the UN Assembly for adopting the Samoa pathway that Kiribati extends its full support. We will also be involved in the coral discussions tomorrow at 1. It's very appreciated that the discussions from the donor nations are they've extended commitments to supporting us, and to reciprocate that, we are also putting in line our governance system so that we use the funds that are extended to us fully. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Kiribati. Now I give the floor to, as a major group, the children and youth.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Yugratna Shrivastava from India, from Children and Youth Major Group, on behalf of major groups and stakeholders. We are strongly committed to an ambitious and effective UNEA. The Global Major Groups and Stakeholders Forum is an essential part of the UNEA process. A longer version of this statement, including the issues and outcomes of our discussion, will be posted on the UNEA portal. We also invite member states to review the compilation of statements and recommendations by major groups and stakeholders for consideration by UNEA 2 that contains the results of regional consultation meetings. We welcome the efforts and proposal of UNEA President on a stakeholder engagement policy. We have reached this point through much compromise and good faith negotiations. But future work is needed to fulfill paragraph 88 of the Rio Plus 20 outcome document. At this time, the President's proposal is our bottom line. Further weakening the policy, such as with silent veto on accreditation, would be unacceptable and result in our rejection of the entire policy. 2015 was a remarkable year for global sustainability decisions and commitments. UNEA 2 is a great opportunity to take bold decisions to continue this political momentum. It should set the stage for delivering full and effective implementation of environmental dimension of 2030 agenda, upholding the principles of common but differentiated responsibilities. We must make sure that no one is left behind, including people with disabilities who have a significant stake in 2030 agenda and its implementation. UNEA is the leading environmental authority in UN and with UNEP as its executive institution. UNEA 2 should advance global policy coherence and complementarity within the UN system and beyond, including implementation at national and regional levels. Effective follow-up mechanisms for monitoring transparency and accountability are essential in delivering on the environmental agenda, and major groups and stakeholders play a critical role in all three areas. The risks posed to the environmental defenders are staggering. On average, 2 people are killed every week defending their land, forests, and waterways. We call upon the member states to protect those who put their lives on the line for the environment. We would like to echo the words of our Executive Director, Mr. Achim Steiner, that there is no UNEA without major groups and stakeholders. We look forward to playing a greater role in the future. We reiterate our commitment to contribute to the UNEA process, and we are up to the challenge. We intend to continue and further strengthen this positive relationship with member states and the new Executive Director. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Executive Director UNEP, Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, it is my great pleasure and honor to speak at the second session of the United Nations Environment Assembly on behalf of the government and the people of Sri Lanka. I would like to congratulate you, Mr. President, and the new UNEA Bureau upon your election to the lead United Nations Environmental Assembly for the next 2 years. I want to assure you, Mr. President, that you can count on Sri Lanka's support as you discharge your duties. I thank Dr. Achim Steiner, the Executive Director of UNEP, and his staff for the excellent arrangements they have made for this session. My delegation would also like to extend our gratitude to the Republic of Kenya for extending warm hospitality since we arrived in the beautiful city of Nairobi. I wish to associate my delegation with the statement made by the distinguished representatives of Argentina on behalf of G77 and China. Mr. President, at the high-level segment of the UNEA session, it is very timely to discuss delivering on the environmental dimension of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Ministerial Policy Review session on healthy environment, healthy people. Both are very relevant at this stage. My delegation looks forward to concise and strong message from this deliberation for supporting the implementation of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda and addressing new and emerging environmental issues in national, regional, and global level. I also welcome the preparation of draft decisions and the resolutions on specific issues such as climate change, chemical and waste management, biodiversity, marine plastic debris, and microplastic that call for concrete actions in the field of environment. My delegation notes the importance of holding forum for ministers and environment authorities of the Asia-Pacific region biennially, with the UNEP support to strengthen engagement of the countries in the preparation of and follow-up to the UNEA sessions. Mr. President, my delegation takes this opportunity to express regrettably that torrential rains with the severe landslide, floods in 22 districts covering all provinces in Sri Lanka, since 15th May 2016 has affected over 400,000 people and stayed around 200,000 people from 50,000 in safety centers in the country. So far, 71 people lost their lives and 127 people are reportedly missing. The government is engaging responses activities and rescue operations in the affected areas, coordinating with the National Disaster Management Center, the Tri-Forces, the police and the civil society. On behalf of the government of Sri Lanka, I take this opportunity to extend our appreciation for the assistance given by the international community during this difficult situation in my country and urge their further assistance for rehabilitation and recovery process in affected areas. This has also given us a strong message to keep more attention in the environment and manage disaster risk in the process of delivering the 2030 Agenda and its Sustainable Development Goals. I would also like to thank for all forms of UNEP continued support to developing countries, particularly Sri Lanka. My delegation hopes that this kind of support, especially financial, technical, would continue on Sri Lanka to manage its environment and natural resources in order to ensure national commitment for sustainable development for the benefits of present and future generations. Mr. President, we are meeting here at the first stage of implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement. My government is taking initiative achieving the prime objective of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development with its goals and Paris Agreement. To become an environmental friendly nation, my government on 6 January 2016 recently launched the Sri Lanka Next Blue-Green Era, a landmark campaign to ensure to low carbon development pathways for economic development and building the resilience for vulnerable communities with respect of implementing the Paris Agreement and Sustainable Development Goals. This initiative is a call to policymakers, politicians, government officials, and other partners to plan the development activities and mechanisms in an environmental friendly manner, aimed at transformation towards low carbon economy. My government has taken pride in hosting 5th Asia Pacific Adaptation Forum from 17th to 19th October 2016 in Colombo. The world event is expected to attract more than 1,500 participants both from nationally and internationally. There will be approximately 600 international participants actively engaged in climate change adaptation in the global arena. On behalf of the government of Sri Lanka, I request relevant international community, government representative and other relevant partners to contribute their knowledge in this event. Mr. President, we hope that session will adopt medium-term strategy for 2018 and 2021 and the program of work and budget for 2018-2019. Resolution stakeholder engagement policy, change in the UNEA cycle and outcome document of the high-level segment in consensus among the member states, enabling UNEP to contribute to the implementation of the environment dimension of the sustainable development. My delegation wishes to work in together with the representatives in ensuring possible outcome from the second session of the UNEA. Mr. President and distinguished delegates, on behalf of my delegation, I look forward to successful conclusion of this session. I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri Lanka. Before adjourning the meeting for lunch, first I would like to thank Her Excellency Yuri Wakungu, Secretary of State for Environment from Kenya, for being with us in the podium this morning. I wish to inform you that the Committee of the Whole will convene at 3 o'clock in this room. And now I give the floor to the Secretary of the Assembly for any housekeeping announcement he may wish to share with us.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We would like to invite government-sponsored delegates and to inform them that they can go to the information desk with the relevant documentation, passport, boarding pass, to process the payment of your DSA, which will be done once this tramit is completed in conference room 5, and we will be able to provide the DSA. A second announcement that I would like to make is to request all delegates to please take their belongings with you as you leave the room, because this room will be reconfigured to allow for the session of the Committee of the Whole. Those are the announcements. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jorge. This meeting is adjourned.
Excuse me, please. Delegates are advised to pick up all their belongings from the desks because we are reconfiguring the meeting room before this afternoon meeting. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't forget to pick up all your belongings from the desks because we are changing the room this afternoon. Thank you.